Lisbon sends something into the sea that has no precedent in the history of Western civilization. 130 ships, 30,000 men, the blessing of the Pope and the mandate of the most powerful monarch on earth, moving toward the shores of England with the unhurried certainty of a verdict that has already been decided. The English fleet is outgunned, outmanned, and outweighed. The shoreline prays. But beneath the water, 40 feet below the keels of the Spanish galleons, something already exists for which the language of 1588 has no word, no image, and no prayer. It doesn't use wind. It doesn't need light. When it decides to act, the Armada won't get a single second to understand what's killing it. To understand what's about to happen, you first need to understand what the Armada actually was. Not fishing boats pressed into service, 130 vessels, war galleons, troop transports, scout ships, each with a specific tactical role inside a single operational plan. Around 2,500 guns, 10 squadrons. Commanders who had fought wars from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. Spanish military doctrine had been sharpened over decades. Close the distance, broadside, board, fight hand to hand. A kind of war in which Spanish infantry was considered the best in Europe. This wasn't a gamble. It was a military machine assembled with the precision of a clock. But the Armada carried more than cannons. Pope Sixtus V had declared the campaign a crusade. Every soldier sailed with absolution. Every captain carried a direct commission from heaven. The Armada brought with it the entire framework through which its people understood the world. That framework would prove more fragile than the ship's ribs. Now we change one variable. In that same water, USS Virginia, a Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine of the United States Navy. The Strait of Dover near Calais sits at roughly 150 feet deep. For a 377-foot submarine, that's the outer edge of shallow water operations, requiring constant trim control and active management of acoustic interference. At 130 feet below the surface, the hydrophones pick up everything. Reflections off the sandy bottom, tidal currents in the channel, the groan of 130 wooden hulls, anchor chains generating a constant low-frequency wash. For the first 40 minutes, the crew does only one thing. The AN/BQQ-10 processing system strips away bottom noise, manually cross-checks acoustic signatures, and separates 130 sources into classified targets. When the tactical picture finally locks, 130 labeled contacts on the display, priorities set. Nothing on the surface gives anything away. No wake, no bubbles, no signal detectable by any observer in the 16th century. 7,800 tons. A nuclear reactor that needs no refueling for years. 20 knots in absolute silence. 12 vertical launch tubes carry Tomahawk cruise missiles. Range over 1,000 miles. Speed around 550 miles per hour. 1,000-pound warheads. The torpedo tubes are loaded with Mark 48 ADCAP. Acoustic homing 65 knots. 650 pounds of high explosive designed to detonate beneath a hull and break it from below with hydraulic force. The Mark 48 doesn't punch through the side of a ship. It goes under the keel and detonates at the point of maximum structural stress. A wooden galleon against a Mark 48 isn't a naval engagement. It's physics. The Tomahawks have a separate target. 23 miles to the northeast, near Dunkirk, the Duke of Parma is holding his troops and landing barges, the land component without which the entire Armada operation has no meaning. 12 Tomahawks leave the vertical launch cells in 90-second intervals. Almost no sound. A hydraulic pulse. No exhaust signature above the waterline. They climb, level off, and head northeast. Dunkirk is 23 miles away. Less than 3 minutes of flight time. The Armada sees the glow on the horizon and reads it as fires on shore. A land threat, not a sea threat. Virginia has time. Parma loses his barges and his window to link up with the fleet. The Armada doesn't know yet that the operation ended before it began. that it's carrying 30,000 men toward a landing that will never happen. 3 a.m. The first Mark 48 leaves the tube, a brief hydraulic pulse absorbed by the water around it. The acoustic homing head locks onto the San Martin within seconds of separation. 65 knots, about 1,200 yards, less than a minute. No instrument aboard the flagship can detect its approach. The men on watch are looking at the surface, at the horizon, the only directions from which a threat has ever come. When the torpedo detonates beneath the keel, the blast wave travels upward through the hull. The San Martin breaks at the midship, masts go sideways, lights go out. On the ships nearby, they see one thing. The flagship is breaking apart by itself, on a calm night, no storm, no enemy vessel in sight. Officers who survived Lepanto look at each other and find they have no tactical category for what they're watching. The squadron command galleons go down one after another. By dawn, the Armada's chain of command has ceased to exist. The Spanish captains do everything right. They pull the surviving ships into a tight defensive formation, the same formation that worked in a dozen campaigns. Guns run out, crews at their stations, boarding parties ready. A tight formation is harder to attack and easier to coordinate. That had always been true. For a torpedo attacking from below, a tight formation means minimum distance between targets and zero opportunity for evasive maneuver, which doesn't exist in 16th century naval doctrine to begin with. The discipline that made the Spanish fleet the best in Europe works against it with mathematical precision. They're doing everything right. It's just the wrong war, the wrong enemy, and the wrong 1,000 years. All of this describes the best case, and the reality is harder. Torpedo supply is finite. 130 ships is more than one loadout. The strategy has to be surgical. Command vessels first, major transports second, then scatter what's left. Ships on the outer edge of the formation have time to run north, and their crews are alive. They'll make it back to Spanish ports with a story no one can confirm and no one can disprove. Virginia can't hold the channel permanently, can't guarantee Spain doesn't try again. The tactical question gets answered in one night. The strategic question stays wide open. In the Escorial, in a private chamber deliberately smaller than a monk's cell, Philip II waits for word. When the real Armada was defeated by storms, his court expected an outburst. Instead, he returned to his paperwork and began planning a second fleet. Not because he didn't grasp what had happened, but because he had no mechanism for accepting a permanent defeat. In this version, the survivors bring something different. The flagship broke apart from within, and no enemy ship was ever seen. There is no theological category for that in 1588. His advisors will try to process the reports. The Inquisition will interview survivors, not out of cruelty, but because it's the only institution with a procedure for the unexplained. None of those procedures will help. Philip II died in 1598, still convinced the right fleet and the right moment were just ahead. Virginia didn't stop him. Time did, the one force that can't be beaten by sail, reactor, or absolute certainty in the righteousness of your mission. The Armada was built with military precision, crewed by the best men of its age, and blessed by the highest religious authority in the Western world. It sailed as absolute certainty and came apart in front of something that had no sail, no face, and no name in any language then spoken. Virginia slipped back into the deep without lights, without sound, without a trace on the surface. England's shores went untouched, not because its defenders were stronger, but because something from another millennium was in the right water at the right moment. If this video made you think differently about how a technological gap doesn't just destroy fleets, it destroys people's ability to understand what's happening to them, hit like. It's the only way to tell the algorithm that conversations like this matter more than clickbait. Subscribe if you want to keep asking questions that history doesn't answer cleanly. And drop a comment. Which historical fleet do you think would have lasted longest? The Armada, Kublai Khan's invasion fleet, or Genghis' treasure fleet?